Hey everybody, welcome back to the Flat Irons Tuning Question of the Week. This week our question comes from Gino asking, would we recommend a rebuilt Title STI for a track car?
It's an interesting question, and it turns out we actually have a fair amount of experience with this because it turns out that my yellow WRX was a Salvage Title. Nigel?
And my race car is a Salvage Title.
And on top of that, it turns out this Pikes Peak car is a flood car. Now, at least in the case of my car and our Pikes Peak car, the Pikes Peak car, it was flooded right up the street. In 2013 when Boulder had this crazy 1,000-year flood. So we knew it was a flood car, but it was something that we were able to go through and actually find out the state of the car before we turned it into a race car. In the case of my car, I was able to see it as it was recovered by the shop, so I knew exactly what state it was in after it was recovered, and then obviously bought the car and had it ever since. How about you, Nigel? Did you know that your car was a Salvage Title, or was it a surprise?
We knew it was a Salvage Title. We had no idea why. We started gutting the car and getting down to the bottom of it. I'm still not 100% sure, but every indication is that it was just hail damage.
Sure.
Looking at all the reports of what was repaired and when it got totaled out, and how bad the hail damage is all over the car, seems pretty likely.
Why would you look at a Salvage Title car? Maybe let's start there. And the reason is because it is a Salvage Title, that really depreciates a car fast. Like, let's say there's a brand new STI on the lot, and hail's a great example, comes through, hail damage, brand new car with like 10 miles on it, that car is going to depreciate a ton. And so the advantage of that, of course, is if you're going to turn it into a race car, you're going to take everything out of it, you're going to put a cage into it, you don't want to spend like full MSRP or whatever on a brand new car if you're going to be taking out half the stuff. But the key is, why is it a Salvage Title? So for you, it sounds like you got lucky and you didn't find any surprises, and really I'd say for a Salvage Title, hail damage is kind of the best possible situation, especially if you're not too worried about the aesthetics of the car, because that's all superficial. Flooding, that is a tricky one. And really, if the car was underwater, you just do not know what you're going to run into. You got to check the electrical and all that. I mean, it could be, it could be anything. I mean, the engine could be hydrolocked. If there's water in the engine and they try to start it without trying to make sure that there's no water in it, they can actually damage or destroy the engine in the process of trying to find out what condition the engine is in. In this case, again, we knew what it was. We were able to drain everything, changed all of the fluids. A couple of times there was water in the transmission. There was water. I don't think there's water in the oil pan, but there's definitely water in the intake path of the car. But we cleaned all that out before we started it, and it did start, and that's why we turned it into a race car. But yeah, that is just such the key. You do not want to walk into any surprises, and I would say, depending on what the reason for the salvage is, you've got to decide how much potential risk you're undertaking, because you're saving money, but if this wiring harness was no good and all of a sudden you have to go in and spend however much money to rewire a car, you probably just spent a good chunk of what you saved by buying it as a Salvage Title. What do you think? What pointers would you give to somebody that's buying a Salvage Title?
But look up as much of the accident history as you can. If there was a rear end accident at some point and they repaired the damage, they might not have repaired the damage. It could be it could be great for a daily driver still. It could track nice and straight, but you get to a situation where you're trying to do a race alignment and replace subframes maybe, and the subframe had been damaged and bent back into shape, and now you want to replace it with a lightweight subframe, and now nothing lines up. You can run into some issues.
And look at the paint. Look for any inconsistencies from one panel to the next of the paint. Look at the gaps, all the doors and the trunk and everything like that. If there's one side where the panel gaps are just way off, I mean, that piece of the car may well have been pulled or replaced. And Gino specifically asked about, well, if there's been frame damage, how bad could it be? And the answer is real bad. Especially when you're trying to get like a high performance alignment where you're trying to max out some of the adjustment settings. If the whole nose of the car is just a little bit off, you may never be able to get the car really to be aligned right, and especially if you got a heck of a deal on it, say, and you go through all the process of putting a cage into it, turning it into your race car, and then you can just never get it to be quite right. I mean, that could be a real shame. A lot of money lost.
A big part of it is alignment for me.
Mm-hmm.
During the course of a track day, your alignment is going to fall away. It's going to happen much more if you can't reach maximums, and it's going to happen much more if the parts are bent or out of shape to start with.
Yeah, and whatever your maximum alignment settings could be might actually be limited by one side that's out of spec by a degree or more, and so then you've got basically your maximum now is maximum on your worst side, and then the other side, which could go actually probably way over that. You've got to just keep it to match. I would say too, look for any kind of mismatched suspension components, because a lot of times, like lower control arms, lateral links, trailing arms, all of these parts of the suspension on a Subaru, they're basically designed failure points. So if you hit a curb, those suspension arms are designed to buckle to try and prevent all the damage from going into the subframe, but it doesn't always work. And if it doesn't work, then the subframe is bent. But you might see like an adjustable link on one side but not on the other. That might indicate that, okay, something is off with this subframe, and that's why they had to put something that's adjustable to try and like dial out that error on one side but not the other. And if you see anything like that, that would be a red flag where like it's probably just not worth the risk of going in to that salvage title, because just who knows what you're running into.
I think it comes down to value. How much you can actually save.
That's true.
If you're looking at a car that's, $5,000 less because it's a salvage title, where are you going to spend that $5,000 bringing it up to the spec that you need? Or are you going to get lucky and you're actually going to save $5,000? If you're going to save $15,000, that's going to be a lot nicer of a deal, and maybe a chunk of that comes back to bringing it back up to spec.
Yeah.
Not all of that, you're in for a much better ride.
For sure. And actually something else worth mentioning to that point as far as savings and cost, most of the time, maybe not all the time, but most of the time, you can't take out a loan on a salvage title car. At least here in Colorado, there's special paperwork that you have to sign if you're purchasing a salvage title car. And then if you ever were to sell that car, like let's say you're not turning it into a race car, and you're just wondering about saving money on a daily driver, you might not be able to fully insure the car. Insurance might actually have to do a thorough inspection of the car before you can even get coverage on it. Like there are actually, after you take delivery, there are some tricks to basically trying to turn a salvage title car into a more normal car, and you're probably going to pay a big penalty when the time comes to sell it. So once the salvage title, even if it's a rebuilt title, it's never going to be the same because it's got that incident on its record. So I guess that would be the other thing I'd throw in there. So I think those are all the high points. It can be done, but you really got to know what you're getting into.
Well, thanks everybody for catching this week's question of the week. We have kind of a big announcement, cool stuff going on. We have a new Discord community that we just started up and a new Patreon that you can subscribe to. And as always, if you have more questions, drop them in the comments below or send us a message on Instagram.
Yeah, thanks very much for liking.
Hell
See,
yeah.
you're wrecking
Fuck
me.
yeah.
Thanks very much for watching. Really appreciate your support. Do head on over and check out our Discord and our Patreon if you can. And until next time, as always, stay tuned to Flyers Tuning.